delighted to welcome you to today's conversation. It is a huge joy to come together again with Antonella and Wendelin, colleagues and friends from MCI. And we had so many conversations in the staff room about children's development, about Montessori practice, about being human beings and what it meant to children. And so it is a joy to try to reenact one of those conversations in the staff room, quite informal and often very disruptive to our flow of work, but very stimulating for our brains, particularly as those of you who know Antonella know how well read she is and how measured she is in giving her guidance and reflections on Montessori. So we welcome you to our conversation, and we treasure the moment when we can share this conversation about what we understand by interrupting and interfering and non-interference in children's learning. We know that young children need connections with adults. We know young children need connections with their peers. We know that the sensitive period for language needs to be strongly supported through conversations and through shared experiences. So I thought it might be useful to begin by thinking about the baby and what babies need from the point of view of having conversations with their prime carers and what those conversations look like. They may not always be oral conversations, yet they often are conversations of love. So how do you feel? What would you like to say about that, Antonella?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to have this conversation together. Yes, you said that babies need interactions. Actually, I think we continue to need interactions. We are born really wired to have interactions and to communicate. If we think in terms of Montessori view of the child, she talks about her human tendencies. So as human beings, we are born and we take with us is very active in us to wanted to have interaction, to communicate, to be together with other human beings. And children are really born with this predisposition to enter the interaction and enter the conversation. And, we have talked many times about what a baby, an infant, is ready to do. We know that the pattern of the face is what the baby likes and is drawn into. So being quite closer to the infant so that the infant can see us, because the focus of his or her vision is really the ideal distance for feeding. That is what we can do from the very, very beginning. Enter this interaction and being there for the child and using our face as the first point of interest for the child. And we also know that the infants like very much the human voice. And we all know that naturally we started to use the high pitch voice, because that is what infants around the world always prefer. We talk of motherese or parentese way of speaking with children. So together with the expression, our big eyes, so the children can see them better, then we use this voice and we pick up possible movements and little expressions that infants have, and we imitate them. So we start from the beginning of life to invite infants and babies into these continuous serve and return is called sometimes. Sometimes it's called a dance, because it's really something that comes and goes, and that is from the very, very beginning.
And how would it change as the children get older? I'm watching this, our granddaughter, how she cares for the dolls that are in the household. And she is already mirroring some of those conversations she had experienced as a baby in the care of the little children, of the little dolls or bigger dolls that she is looking after. So as they begin, as the sensitive period for language unfolds, we begin to, those interactions become slightly different, don't they?
Well, we naturally follow the child, and if the secret of good communication is to be open and responsive and attuned to the child, we follow as the child develops and is able to pay more attention, is learning, is imitating for social reasons. Like you are saying, if the infant imitates from birth some movements that we can show with our mouth and is there already, it is a little bit later that the baby starts to really imitate because wants to be part of this social life with others. And so what your little girl sees that happens in the house also for the because there are two sisters, so they see what happens, then is imitated and brought into this way of playing and replaying these beautiful moments of care, because it's something that she has lived and she can see, so she can really imitate and make this experience our own. So there is a lot of elaboration, the memory of what has been felt that is reenacted, and you can start to see some sort of symbolic play as well. So
being able to observe that reenactment of the lived experiences from very early on is so wonderful, because in the case of my grandchildren, it will always involve animals. It will always involve being outside and caring not only for human beings, but also for nature and animals. So it is interesting how through communication, we also share the human values of the family or of the community in which the children live. I think it always reminds me that learning in the early years is so internet connected, it's so intertwined, it's so complex. Sometimes we just try to make it, to simplify it by saying do not interfere or do not interrupt, but we kind of forget that limits all sorts of other opportunities from the children's point of view, isn't it?
Well, the learning of children is always, like you say, very, very complex. And we have mentioned language, we have mentioned social learning and cognitive learning, but so much emotional learning is there. So it's really the whole child, and that's why it's so complex. Like you're saying, interactions are very important for attachment. So we are really looking at the whole person, and the child through these early interactions that form the base for constructing the internal working model is really something that is all rounded. Is about knowing about themselves, knowing about other people, knowing about what other people do together, how they look after each other, how there is love, how there can be trust. So all these values that are really communicated, absorbed, and then elaborated by children is incredible.
And of course, movement is also an integral part of this learning process. It's so interesting that our youngest granddaughter always, when there is an upset, she always asks for a cuddle afterwards. So if she gets hurt or if she is unhappy, she suddenly she will cry a little bit and then she will say, cuddle, cuddle. And she wants that, she will run to you and she wants to be embraced. So it is just so wonderful when children have the tools through which to express themselves, not only physically and cognitively, but also emotionally. And I think that those interactions are so important in order to establish the patterns of emotional support for young children.
Yes, definitely. And this happens also when they are a little bit older, to know that the adult is there and is available, we say sensitive, and is a word that really encompasses many different qualities of what is the attitude and the behavior, what we do as adults with children. The fact of being attentive and warm and loving and respectful. And then we are available, we are really prompt if there is a need. But if there isn't a immediate need, being respectful is to respect really what the child is doing without stepping in immediately and interrupting.
And this is often the time when the toddler or two-year-old child begins to express wishes not to be interrupted, not to be interfered with. So this quest for autonomy is often linked with this rejection of help, because they have this need to do things for themselves. And that attentive adult, that sensitive adult is really, really important, because it's so easy to undermine the child's confidence in wanting to do things for themselves, isn't it? Or replacing the child's capacity to do things for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Montessori talks about the need to be independent, to be autonomous, and how important it is to respect what the toddler and later the young child does, and also giving time for children to take these early decisions is very important, because if we, out of love and wanting to help, we step in too quickly to facilitate, then is when we interrupt. So there is very much the time need for time and silence to wait for the child that starts the movement, starts the action, takes the decision, and decides what might want to say, needs time to elaborate and all of that.
And I really liked your idea that it is important to give children the opportunity to make decisions. And when they begin to play, when they begin to, when they demonstrate that they have made a decision, not to suggesting, to give them time for that activity to unfold itself, to see what the child wants to do with the activity. And I think that that can sometimes be tricky for us as Montessorians, because we imagine that the activity is designed for a certain purpose, and we are eager to share that purpose with the children. But sometimes they show us that they have a different need. I remember watching a child who was taking out the cylinders and very intentionally letting them roll off the table, because he was interested at the age of 2.5 in the sound the cylinders made. And because they are of different sizes, of course, they made a different sound. And it's so easy to misinterpret this important learning from the child's point of view for misuse, or putting it away. You are not using it properly, you are not quite ready for this. But we cannot ever fully understand what the child is really learning from the exploration, can we? We can only kind of glean little snippets of what might be happening, and this is where observation becomes so important.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You're right. Montessori says that what she has learned from observing children. And actually, she talks about the prepared environment as an environment where the child can really show something of what's happening, the thinking, the emotions, the interest. There is this natural unfolding from the inner core of the child, and can be seen only if we have an environment that facilitates that, and then if we stand back and we observe. And I find very interesting that she talks of active but prudent observation, and the importance of being humble in front of the child. The way I understand it is like this: not to make assumption, not to rush in saying, oh, the child is doing this, so that is what he needs or she needs. That is what I'm going to do, because if he's doing this, this is immediately next step. And we take charge and we own everything that, and we take it away from children. And so being humble and open-minded and use the knowledge that we have, but being ready to fully and deeply respect what the child is doing. That is giving us so much more in understanding the child. So the idea of attuning comes together with this kind of observation.
And it is to actually grow your observational skills takes a long time, doesn't it? Because initially, after training, one is so keen to use everything that one has learned in the training. And because of the structure of how the materials are presented and the scaffolding that the materials provide, sometimes we think that what we have learned in our training is the best thing for the child, but we can totally miss the little nuance or the little interest, as was with this child who was rolling the cylinders, that we, in a way, it is such a tricky thing. And in the context of this attuned observation, I have loved the quote by Julie Fisher, in which she says that observing is interacting with the child without movement or talk. And I think that it is that your mind needs to be fully engaged in what we are observing, but trying to be non-judgmental. It's almost like doing a meditation on the child doing something, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, I like this meditation. Well, it's true. It is a very, very active act. Is really, when we observe, we are not passive, even though there isn't a movement. Yeah. We are very active emotionally and intellectually, and all our curiosity is there to really look at what the child is doing and look at the expression of the face, the body language of the child, and listening to what the child might be saying, because he's with others, because he is talking about what he's doing. So all of that is active and inside us, but from the outside, we are these calm, calm, relaxed adults. It seems that a very important key of effective interactions is that when they come, both the child and the adult are relaxed. But doesn't mean that we are passive when we are observing and thinking and getting in touch, possibly identifying with what the child might be thinking and feeling as he is engaged in that particular activity. I like very much that Julie Fisher in her book talks about also don't look only at what the child is doing with what they do with their hands, because we think activity is doing. Yes, there is movement, and Montessorians, as Montessorians, we know that is so important, but also look at the body language, the expression of the child. Have this connection, aim to have this connection with the whole experience of the child, and give yourself and the child the time for this to happen. There is no need to rush into this.
And sometimes when young children are really concentrating, they have got a little expression. Sometimes they stick their tongue out, or sometimes they even hum themselves as they are engaged in the activity. I always love it when children do something and sing alongside. It is as if they are telling me, I'm happy in this moment. Of course, it's only my interpretation, but I think that presence, that shared moment of learning, when the child feels that you are there present for them. We mustn't underestimate that quiet but very focused presence, because I personally feel that it's really nurturing for young children to know that you are there for them at that moment, because it's so easy as an adult to be observing and watching the rest of everything that's going on. Or, how do you manage the observation, the real concentrated focus on the child without interrupting, just be there in the moment, whilst tons of activities are going on in the classroom.
Yes, it's true. And we have learned sit in a or position yourself so that you can see the whole classroom. So we have this need to have the whole picture, to sense the whole group there. And it's true, it's needed, but there is also the need to be there. Also when we observe, to know that if the child is doing something and is independent in what he's doing, but then it looks up because maybe needs to say something, oh, look, or I'm a little bit stuck, that there is this prompt response that could be just a smile, an encouragement or acknowledgement of what the child is doing, and then see if actually that's enough for the child. Yeah. There is no need to be ready to move immediately, but there is this connection that the child feels. So I think it is a very tricky balance for teachers, for adults in the Montessori classroom, because we have read, we talked so much about how the interference and the interruption can happen just because we pass on and we maybe we touch the child because he's doing something that we like and is a demonstration of love, or we say, oh, amazing, but at that moment is not what the child needs. And so to be respectful and not interrupting, not even with a positive comment, but being ready to respond is always a very fine line, and it's not black and white.
And it may work for some children in some situations, and it may not work in other situations. It's so finely nuanced, and we don't always get it right either.
No, I find it useful to what Julie Fisher writes about observing and how to tune in, and she likes the three words that we work like what kind of intervention or help could the child need, and that's let me have the time to ask myself this question and see what I can answer to myself while I'm observing. So is that about what? Is about when? Is it now that this help or this intervention is needed? Is it really needed now? I can decide if it is the right moment, really, and whether it's right or not. And maybe I can decide, well, let me wait. I can do it later. There will be another occasion. Let me see what happens. So she has this trio of words, and later on in her book on the research that she's done with practitioners in Oxfordshire, I think it is an amazing research, action research that they have done together. She offers another group of three words that is wait, watch, and wonder. So again, there is always this sense of these possible questions that help us to get in tune, understand what's happening for the child, observe, but being present and being active and decide. So watch, wait, watch what the child is doing, listen, of course, look at everything, and then wonder. And so I understand this as reflecting and trying to interpret what is seen in order to understand it, but really like being full of wonder for what we can see this child or these children, what they are doing.
This would be a really very useful tool for teachers who enter the classroom for the first time, often soon after their qualification, for their mentors to use little scenarios from the classroom when something happens, and just reminded them, well, you know, what did you see? So what was it that you watched? And did you wait? And why didn't you wait? What it would have been like if you waited, you know, those kind of little things, and exploring a little bit more for us to really understand why the wait is important, because only when we wait have the opportunity for the inner part of the child to unfold, to get the glimpse, if we are lucky, to be able to wonder about what has motivated the child, why they needed to do it in that way, or simply be amazed by the child's capacity to do something in that way, isn't it?
Well, what I really like about where we have come in this discussion is we're away from a sort of quite dogmatic, sort of black and white approach to interaction or non-interference. And I think some of us might be in either in a parenting environment or in a Montessori setting environment, whether that's a childminding setting or a classroom, where we're like, no, we need to be silent. The child must explore everything, and that it's up to the child, and we follow the child only. So that some of us are in that sort of camp, and then there are others who are like, no, we need to talk because the child needs to develop language, and we need to help them along. And it always to me, often this discussion has seemed quite, it's either one or the other, quite binary. And where we've come is actually these two things can coexist. We can interact and not interfere, right? And I love these words from Julie Fisher that you've so generously shared with us, Antonella, that we wait and we observe and we wonder and we think, can I do something later? I really like that, because it just brings it together, that we can do both.
And it's such a wonderful tool for reflection about our own practice. And, all of us have opportunities to wonder and to share our wonderings with others in order to get a deeper understanding. I wish I could recall the so many conversations I have had with Antonella when I said, well, I thought about this and I thought, blah, 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 blah. And Antonella, because I'm always more kind of directive in those conversations, and Antonella would very gently say, well, I wonder, have you thought about it? And suddenly a totally new scenario unfolds, totally new opportunity unfolds for the child. And I think that's the value of the interactions between colleagues and between respectful relationships within the setting, because that's suddenly having that perspective from somebody else suddenly opens a new possibility, not only for the child, but also for us as adults in our practice. So there's actually a new layer to the whole conversation about, do I interfere or don't I interfere, in terms of what have I learned from this, which would enable me to be a little bit more observant or a little bit more careful about my interference or about my judgments, because we are so quickly to make judgments in our heads. Just if we could stand a little bit more still at that moment of the judgment, we might offer something more positive to the child.
Yes, definitely. I think that's the strength of the team. The group of colleagues is incredible in continue to reflect and to help each other in becoming more and more effective, because this reflection and this dialogue brings something that is new, is what we understand together is more than if we put just together what we say. There is this dynamic conversation, dialogic thinking is called sometimes, but we know that we really will learn and we develop something that is more than just the sum of what we say when we are together. And this is when we talk about shared sustained thinking, or if we talk about dialogic thinking, or when we talk about co-construction, is there. We know these words, and we talk about this for children, what could be useful for the child together with someone else, with this conversation that allows to think more together. But it's like you're saying, it's for colleagues. And part of moments of growing together can be really designed or carried out in a more informal way, but make them part of the way we work together.
Thank you, Antonella, for this conversation. It has warmed my heart to be able to explore this very challenging and complex topic for Montessori practitioners. And it is evident that we will need to continue in this conversation. And I hope you will be happy to return again, perhaps next term or in the summer term, to continue and share your insights. Thank you very much for tonight.
Thank you very much to both of you. It has been such a, like you say, warm, loving conversation, and I really feel that there was our love for children, our love for each other in working together, and in continuing to think about our values and our practice, and to make it better. Thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you, Wendelin and Barbara.